Thanks for coming to the Practical Debate Knowledge elective. The following elective is advice that is designed to make you more effective as a debater in ways that have very little to nothing to do with the actual arguments that you're making. Yeah, you're fine. Yeah. Sorry. Oh, okay. Well, goodbye. Good to see you. This is very little to do with the arguments that you're making and much more to do with the ways that you sort of comport and behave yourself in debates. And I promise that if you take this advice, you will be better positioned in debates. Keep in mind that a lot of this advice is crowdsourced, meaning that other adults, many of whom are at this camp, have said these things, that these are things that you should or should not be doing. So that means that the very people who will be judging you hold these opinions, which should kind of suggest that it is meaningful to take them seriously. So I want to start with just some big macro, big picture thoughts. And my first piece of advice is just to read more. You should be reading more books. You should be reading the news. If your learning style is different, you can be listening to audiobooks or podcasts if that fits you better. But the point is that you should be more informed about the world. You want to be more knowledgeable. You want to look smarter and actually be smarter, which you will be and accomplish if you do more reading. So I can't emphasize enough, just read more. I almost don't care what you're reading as long as you are reading. Even reading like blogs will give you some information about what various people think about various things in the world. So read more. Second big picture thought is you want to treat debate with some degree of professionalism. So debate is obviously an extracurricular and we're all here to have fun, but you will improve your odds of success if you treat debate with a degree of seriousness. And that's for a few reasons. It's because the people judging you and the people that you interact with, many of them have chosen debate as their profession, right? Like I'm an example of someone who does debate professionally for my career. It's what I do. And many of the other people that you interact with, whether they are high school coaches, college coaches, even people who show up to judge on the weekends, this is a job for them, right? And so when they interact with students, they want to see students who care about the activity and who are putting in some thought into how they're acting and what they're doing. So you'll improve your odds of success if you treat debate with a degree of professionalism that is required of something that you take seriously. The third big picture thought that I have is that debate is in many ways a performance. It definitely includes an element of performance at all times. Your judge who is watching you, the person who controls the ballot and the speaker points, is judging you on a total performance. They are not only or solely focused on the arguments that you're making and what goes on during speech times, which we will talk a lot about, but they're also focused on kind of the bigger picture about kind of who you are. Hi, welcome. Are you Harris? Yeah. Cool. So debate is a performance, which means that everything that happens between the time that you walk in the door and the time that you leave should be treated as a performance. It should be treated as, behaving not as you necessarily would alone in your room with no one watching, but with someone. The fact that someone is watching who will ultimately determine your fate in many ways, your debate fate, should be considered. And a lot of the advice is geared towards maximizing and improving your performance during that time. So those are my big picture kind of top level thoughts. The next section that I have is impressing your judge in a general sense. So, a lot of this is geared toward, you want to impress the person who, like I said, controls the ballot, controls the speaker points. And in order to do that, I think there's a number of things that you can do to make yourself seem serious, to make yourself seem committed, and to present the best possible version of yourself. The first one that I have is always have paper, pens, a timer, and a stand. So these are like the essential tools that you need that are, physical materials that you need to have a good debate. And it is obviously possible to forget these things, but minimize the amount that you're forgetting them. Whenever you're going to a tournament, just train yourself to always have paper, pens, your timer, and your stand. You don't want to be the person who has to ask the other team or ask the judge, worst case, to borrow paper or pens or a timer or a stand. And like, there is some expense involved here, obviously, but I think that if you're here at debate camp, you're already investing a fair amount in debate, and it is worth making the investment into the office supplies that make debate possible and that make you able to have a complete debate without any outside assistance. So always have paper, pens, timer, and stamp. And obviously bring them with you to tournaments. Second is a little bit more meta. Project confidence. Project confidence at all times. Part of this is faking it till you make it, because you may not always feel confident, but you want to project as if always be acting as if you believe you are going to win the debate. The best debaters give the impression of confidence and poise. One kind of small example of a way to do this, or something to not do if you are doing it, is to avoid giving self-assessments where you say things like, hey, sorry, this speech is going to be really bad. Or you give the speech and then you're like, wow, that really sucked. Don't do any of that. Do not give self-assessments during the debate. You want to project as if you think you are winning and as if you are killing it at all times. So project confidence and give the impression that you're winning, even if you don't feel like you are. There's only a risk that you're giving your judge ammunition to vote against you or give you low speaker points if you're giving the impression that you think you're not doing a good job. Third, also a little bit meta, know your evidence. So the very best debaters at the highest level of the activity, particularly in college, but even in high school, have cut their own cards. They have cut and researched the evidence that they read in debates. And so ideally, you want to get to a place where you are in that position where you have actually produced the research and the evidence that you're reading. But until you get to that place, the best thing that you can do is to know your evidence, know the evidence that you're reading. Knowing your evidence inside and out makes you a better debater and gives your judge the impression that you're on top of it. It can even give the impression that you maybe are the person who cut that evidence, which will impress them. So knowing your evidence inside and out is a really important component of it. Is part of projecting confidence. It is part of projecting know-how. It gives the impression that you've read. So get familiar with your evidence. One kind of practical tip that I have for doing this, many of you are at some point doing speaking drills. You should always be doing speaking drills with the evidence that you're going to read. So your own files. So be giving, practice speeches and doing speaking drills with evidence that you'll read in a debate. So you'll get familiar with your evidence by doing speaking drills with the evidence that you're actually going to read in a debate. I want to sidebar quickly about speaking drills in case that's something that interests people at all. I think that the best speaking drills are just reading your evidence at kind of a high degree of speed with a high degree of clarity. A lot of people do benefit from individual speaking drills. So if you're someone who's been told that clarity is an issue, you might do the over enunciation drill. If you're someone who struggles because you're over processing the information, you might benefit from the backwards drill. If you lose your place a lot, you might, benefit from zooming in and stuff like that. So there are individual speaking drills that can help with particular speaking issues. But I think that the best speaking drills are ones that build your endurance and your stamina and that are reading evidence that you're going to read in a debate. So I would do speaking drills for at least 15 minutes a day. 15 minutes a day. That is longer than you have to speak in a single debate, right? Because in any given debate, you're speaking for 13 minutes at a time. So 15 minutes is more than you're speaking for an individual debate, and thus it builds up your stamina and gives you more endurance for speeches that you'll give that are much shorter than that. So 15 minutes is kind of a minimum. I think that a lot of high-level debaters speak up for up to 30 minutes a day, and I certainly recommend that if you're someone who does want to get to be very good. But I would start with a minimum of 15 minutes. It doesn't take that much time, and it can give you an edge in terms of your speaking abilities. The second component of knowing your evidence is starting to get to know your opponent's evidence. So try never to go through a whole debate without referencing a single piece of evidence read by the other team. At a minimum, you want to have read your opponent's evidence on the critical issues in the debate and be able to do evidence comparison on those issues. So be able to say, our evidence is better than theirs because, and be able to give reasons to prefer your evidence. And that requires actually knowing what the opponent's evidence says, where it is from, when it is from, all of those things. So know your opponent's evidence as well. There's lots of time that you get to read your opponent's evidence through both before and during debates. So before debates, the existence of the wiki is very useful for, I want to read through their 1AC or I want to read through their negative positions. And that's kind of a place to get a head start on reading your opponent's evidence. But you also have the whole debate. So during cross-ex, during prep time, when you're preparing your speech, read the cards that your opponent is reading on the critical issues in the debate and be able to do evidence comparison. Next is cross-examination. Take cross-examination seriously. It is a speech. So you'll sometimes hear people say this, that cross-ex is more speech time. That is 100% true, because it is time that your judge is listening to what you think about what is happening in the debate and hearing your assessment and your questions for the other team about their strategy, about their evidence, about what is going on in the debate. So go into cross-examination with a plan. Have questions prepared before every cross-ex. Never go into a cross-ex without knowing what you want to get out of it. The next thought I have about cross-ex is that you all are familiar with the idea of like open cross-ex. I think that is sort of silly for a couple of reasons. I don't think that it is like a D rule that you should never ask questions during another person's cross-ex, but the whole premise of the way debate is structured, and we may end up talking about this a little bit at the end if we have time, is that the person who is not asking questions or answering questions has a speech coming up. They have a speech that they're about to give, right? And so that's like built into the design of how debate is structured. And so for you to be asking questions during a cross-ex during a cross-ex that's not yours, is foregoing preparation time that you would otherwise have. And so it is not that other people can never ask questions or answer questions during someone else's cross-ex, but it is not strategic for you. It is not the best use of your time. And most of the time, your partner will have it covered. You have to kind of trust that your partner knows what they're doing and has a plan for cross-ex, and be willing to trust that, right? So if you're asking or answering questions in someone else's cross-ex, something is probably going wrong. So most judges will allow open cross-ex, so you're not going to hear if someone is like opposed to open cross-ex, they'll probably say it in their judge philosophy, and they're probably pretty old school. So it is not that it is a problem for your judge in terms of what they're going to allow. It is more that it is potentially an issue for the strategic use of your time in the debate. And a corollary to this is never, ever ask your partner if they have questions. Underscore, exclamation point, period. Never ask your partner if they have any cross-ex questions. I hear this all the time, and it is such an ethos killer, because it suggests that you do not have a plan for your cross-ex, that you do not know what you're doing. And it suggests that you've run out, it suggests that you've run out of questions, that you're not sure what is going on, that you are just kind of afloat. And then it also detracts from your partner's preparation time, right? So that's what we were just talking about, that whoever is not participating in a cross-ex has a speech coming up. And so because they have a speech coming up, they have things to do. And so asking your partner if they have cross-ex questions not only, is bad for your own self-image that you're projecting to the judge, but is also detrimental for the partner. Another kind of cross-ex pitfall to avoid is asking questions that are about what has been said in the speech. So obviously, clarification questions are very useful. Like if you want to clarify, the text to the alternative, or you want to clarify which counterplan text was read, or you want to make sure that you understand the arguments that are being made. But questions that are like, did you make any theory arguments? What cards did you read on this flow? Where did you stop reading? All suggest that you have not been flowing. And like a top level thought that should arguably have been part of the introduction to this elective is always be flowing. So questions that suggest that you are not flowing are also actively detrimental. The last thought I have about cross-ex is going to sound a little bit weird, or it's going to maybe take some of you by surprise, but we call it cross-ex or cross-examination, or maybe CX. We don't call it cross. And sometime in the past couple of years, people started calling it cross, and it annoys everyone that I have talked to. Do you all know where you started doing this? The place that and maybe this is why there's such a stigma among judges about this, but the place that I first heard that was in Public Forum. So I think it is maybe an import from Public Forum, but either way, let's say cross-ex or CX or cross-examination. Let's not say cross. Next, face the judge at all times during the debate. You need to set up the room to facilitate this if it is not already designed this way. Never give a speech or a cross-ex facing away from the judge. This is another thing that, like, I think used to be very common sense because you're communicating with the judge, or you ought to be. It's the judge who is deciding the debate. And so you naturally would want to be facing them. But something to do with online debate, I think, has like poisoned people's brains so that they forget that like the person sitting at the back of the room is the judge, or they forget something. But I see more and more people who give speeches facing away from the judge, or even facing, like, if you all are judging me, even if I'm facing this way, that is not toward the judge. You should be facing the judge at all times. And that includes cross-examination. That even includes prep time, because you just want to have a gauge on what your judge is thinking. Many judges give lots of nonverbal cues, and you can figure out what's going on with them by watching their face. You cannot do that if you are facing away from them. So face your judge at all times and set up the room to facilitate this. Next, always be the nicer team. Judges don't want to vote for people they think are rude or condescending or not nice. That means that you should be the one to de-escalate if things are getting heated in a cross-ex. So be the calmer team, calmer than you are, dude. You want to be the de-escalatory team. And that means, that sometimes means like, okay, you're like getting into a heated cross-ex. It sometimes means just like quieting down. Means maybe you stop talking and let the other person like shout themselves out. It like looks different in different debates, but be de-escalatory, be the nicer team. It means don't be condescending either to your partner, to the judge, or to the other team. Always be, polite and thoughtful. It also includes little things like not policing the other team's prep time. It's like fine to keep track of prep time, to say like, hey, I think you have 4 minutes left or whatever, but like watching out for being like, actually, I think you have 4 minutes and 50 seconds, not 4 minutes and 52 seconds. Or like when the other team stands up and you're like, what's the order? That is like a little extra. We don't need to do it. Just like be the nicer team, which includes being the calmer, more reasonable team. Somewhat relatedly, time your own prep. So keep track of your own prep time, write it down when you've ended it. Don't ask for or announce how much prep you intend to take at the beginning of prep time. So sometimes people are like, all right, I'm going to take 2 minutes, or like, please tell me when 2 minutes have elapsed. Don't do that. Just time it. You can make mental notes for yourself. Like, I want to take 2 minutes, but don't make it someone else's problem how much prep time you take. You want to solely keep track of your own prep time. The judge does not care how much prep time you use and probably isn't timing themselves. So it is up to you to keep track of. That brings me to stealing prep time. We should not do it. Who knows what stealing prep time means? Go ahead. Yeah, good. So just using prep when when the timer for prep time is not actively running. Be doing things that are preparation for speeches when prep time is not running. So we need to not steal prep. It is this is a very important piece of practical debate knowledge, that stealing prep is frowned upon. And as you all said, like, it's a little bit harder to police over Zoom because you could have your camera off and say you're going to the bathroom, and there's like not a lot that anyone can do about it. But like, as professionals who are conducting ourselves in a reasonable manner, we're going to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and we're not going to do that. And in person, what this looks like is a little bit more obvious, right? It's like you are writing while the person is standing up to speak, or you're writing or typing while someone's sending an email, or you are standing up and you're making notes on your flow as you're getting ready to speak. It's like very obvious and can be identified by your judge, and it's something that you don't want to do. Next, this is one that among the pieces of advice that was crowdsourced that I have some explanation for, although it doesn't bother me as much, but you want to put your flows on your stand. So one of the reasons to have a stand, or the reason to have a stand, is to use it, right? You put your flows on it, you put your computer on it to read evidence, and you want to be able to use it effectively. Rather than holding your flows in your hand, which does a couple of things that can be problematic. It can make you kind of shakier and less firm and stable as you speak. It can incentivize you to like walk around, which is distracting. And it otherwise just detracts from your ability to kind of speak professionally, to give a really solid, well-delivered speech. You want to have your flows on your stand. Next, don't count down to your speech. This is another thing that I see more and more that used to be something that only novices did. They'd be like, okay, 3, 2, 1, go. And now for some reason, like people do it all over the place, like even in higher level debates. Don't count down to your speech. Judges think it looks goofy. You can do it internally if you want to. If for some reason it helps you to be like 3, 2, 1, just do it inside your head. Don't say 3, 2, 1. Just start the timer and begin speaking when you're ready. And we don't want to take too much time in the lead up to being ready, which we'll cover in a couple of minutes. Next, and this is sort of big picture and does require some argumentative knowledge. So hopefully if it's something that you haven't done in lab, you'll do it eventually, but learn how to kick out of arguments and that you're not going for, and know the difference between dropping and kicking arguments. So sometimes people are like, we're dropping T. And the first problem with that is that you don't need to tell us if you're not going for T, just don't go to that page because it's a procedural argument. The second problem is that you're saying we're dropping it, which is not what you're doing. You're kicking it. So it's, problematic on a couple of levels. Know the difference between dropping and kicking arguments and know how to properly kick out of an argument. And again, this is something that you'll probably cover in lab if you haven't already, but it requires conceding a particular defensive argument that takes out the offense on that page. And so you need to be specific about the argument that you're conceding and why it takes out the offense. Somewhat relatedly, don't accuse the other team of dropping arguments if they haven't. So sometimes people will be like, they dropped all their turns case arguments. They only said that it doesn't turn the case, blah, 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 whatever. Well, you've just said that they answered it. So that you've just said they said, meaning that they did in fact answer it. So they did not drop it. So avoid using the language of conceded or dropped unless an argument is completely unanswered. The last kind of note that I have about professionalism and impressing your judge as a general matter is talking about sending analytics. So again, this is like a somewhat new phenomenon in the world of paperless, and I think has gotten perhaps more aggravated by Zoom debate. But judges really don't want to hear about whether analytics are being sent either way. The reason is that it shouldn't matter because you should be flowing. If you can flow your opponent's speech, it should not matter if they are sending out analytics. And if you cannot flow what they're saying, the judge probably can't either, so it doesn't really matter. So that includes both, not kind of complaining or making a big deal about it if the other team doesn't send analytics. It also includes not making a big deal about it yourself. So sometimes people ask me in lab, should we be sending analytics? I just don't care. Do whatever you want to do. I think that it is a waste of time to delete analytics from your document. And it also, again, sort of presupposes that the other team isn't flowing or can't flow, which if that's the case, you're in a good position anyway. Because if the other team is unable to answer your arguments unless they are in front of them in a speech doc, something is going wrong on their end. So if sending analytics makes the difference in a debate, something has already gone wrong and you're likely to win anyway. Does that make sense to people? Okay. Next category is a big one. It is minimizing dead time in debates. So as a kind of the top level of reasons to think about this, at most tournaments, decision time is limited. So there is on the schedule, there is a set time by which judges must submit their decisions. You want your judges to have as much time as possible to make a good decision, right? You don't want someone who's yeah, this was a good debate. I didn't really know what was happening. I didn't have enough time to make up my mind. So like, I guess. That is not the kind of decision you want to hear. You want to give your judge the maximum time to make a good decision. That means that you should be maximizing that time by minimizing the amount of time that the actual debate takes. So the total time that a debate should take, if you combine speech time with prep time, is 80 minutes, 1 hour and 20 minutes. So if decision time, for example, is 2 hours after the start of the debate, that should leave 40 minutes for your judge to decide. That is plenty of time. That is a ton of time. You want to give your judge the full 40 minutes to read whatever evidence is relevant, to do the thinking that they need to do, and to make a good decision. Judges are also very busy and value their own time. If a debate is pretty simple to decide, they will want to decide, give feedback, and get out of there. So if they're stuck there for a full 2 hours because the debate takes extra time, they will be unhappy with you. So you want to be the team that is efficient, that is making the debate move as fast as possible. And there's a lot of specific details that I have about ways to do this. First, clear out your computer before tournaments so that you can use it with maximum efficiency. So like if it is acting weird, if you're having some kind of problem, get it checked out before a tournament. You don't want to have computer problems during the tournament that slow down debates. You should also close out of old Word documents and browser windows because these take up memory in your computer and slow it down. So just like shut it down, close all your browser windows in your Word documents, give it the old restart or shut down and start it back up so that your computer is operating at maximum capacity. Second, learn how to use email and be able to do it proficiently. There are very few things more annoying than having dead time in debates due to email use. Like if you need to, practice setting up email chains, practice sending emails, practice downloading documents. Like if you have trouble during debates getting that stuff done, practice it. Learn how to use email and be able to do it efficiently. This is another thing that's like, it's different from paper debate because it is a requirement for the debate to happen, but it is one that can build in a lot of dead time and be very frustrating, especially for people like me who have had the experience of just like showing up, reading cards, getting the cards afterward, like having none of the email process be part of the debate. So practice email chains, get proficient in email, be able to do it efficiently. Next, you want to go to the room immediately upon receiving a pairing, whether that is online or in person. As soon as you get a pairing, go to the room. You want to be able to get disclosure out of the way very quickly. And that's important because it gives you more prep time. It is also important because it will, again, maximize the amount of time that your judge has once they get there. And we'll talk more about kind of when the judge arrives in a second. Actually, I guess we'll talk about it now. You want to set up the email chain before the judge arrives at the room. Most judges have their email address in their paradigm. So you can easily get it from the judge philosophy. You can also get your opponent's emails during the disclosure process, and I would do that then. So when you're getting disclosure, also get your opponent's emails to set up the email chain. So the email chain should be already set up. If for example, it's a new affirmative, you can set up the email and send a test email and then send the 1AC when the judge is ready. But at any rate, you should make it so that you are ready to begin the debate as soon as the judge arrives. If there is some other outstanding thing, like that you don't have the judge's email, get it the second they walk in so that you can hit send immediately. You should be ready to begin as soon as the judge arrives. Obviously, if the judge is the one creating dead time, they like show up and they're not ready and they're like, oh, I need to like get all my stuff set up, like whatever, just like be patient with that. That's fine. They are the person who has the control and the authority. They hold the ballot. So like, let them do their thing, but you don't want to be the one creating delays. Cross-ex begins after the timer for the speech goes off, for the end of the speech. I think that people have gotten a little bit too deferential on, are you ready for cross-ex? I think you should assume that they're ready unless told otherwise. There should not be a big gap in time between the end of a speech and the beginning of cross-ex. If they need to get a drink of water or whatever, they will tell you that. Otherwise, assume that cross-ex will begin. And a very important corollary to this is that cross-ex begins whether or not you have a marked copy of the evidence. Do not demand to wait for cross-ex to start for a marked copy to be sent or to send a marked copy. The person who has given the speech can finish marking the cards and send out the copy while cross-ex is going on. You should be able to multitask like that. And part of the reason this is so important is that, and so frustrating for judges, is that it has never mattered in a debate. People are constantly like, oh, we're going to wait for a marked copy to be sent. And then they never talk about the evidence. So like, who cares? Like, why did we wait for that? That is the most infuriating thing as a judge. So do not demand to wait until the marked copy is sent. Do not demand to wait to send the marked copy. Just do it and get it out of the way while the cross-ex begins. Next, be ready to send the email when you stop prep time. So you do not want to stop prep time and take 5 minutes to send the email. This kind of gets back to like proficiency at using email. It also gets back to not having extraneous browser windows open. It's like your email window should be directly accessible to you right next to the documents that you're using for the debate. So when you stop prep and take a bunch of time to send the email, that is dead time. We want to minimize dead time. Another, a good place where this becomes particularly important and where you can really impress your judge, the 1 and R should be sent by the time the cross-ex of the 2 and C ends. The 1 and R email should already be sent by the time the timer goes off for the end of cross-ex of the 2 and C. Did I blow your mind? A little? People are like, no, I don't care about this. I promise your judge cares about it, because it is one of the times that dead time is most obvious and most annoying, is like cross-ex for the 2 and C ends, and then there's a big gap before the 1 and R starts. That should never happen. Given that you are neg in this scenario, you should also care about this, because it is your speech time. You are maximizing the arguments that the judge is hearing that are negative arguments. If you are giving a big lapse between the 2 and C and the 1 and R, for starters, we all know the 1A is probably prepping during that time because they didn't come to this elective and they're stealing prep. So like, you're giving them free prep time. Don't do that. For another, you're letting the judge forget the things the 2 and C has said before the 1 and R starts. And for another, you're using a bunch of dead time that is annoying the crap out of your judge. So the 1 and R should be sent by the time the timer for the 2 and C ends. And the reason this should be possible, as you all know, the 1 and R gets so much prep time. The 1 and R gets the prep time for the 2 and C. They get the cross-ex of the 2AC. They get the 2 and C. They get the cross of the 2 and C. It adds up to a ton of time. So 1 R should never need those last like 15 seconds. Next, minimize bathroom breaks during the debate. So if you are like a high bathroom user, go before and after. It's another example of a place where a lot of people do it, and most of them are stealing prep when they do it. And it is unnecessary dead time. Now, if someone on the other team goes to the bathroom, and obviously we're assuming in-person debate here, although this applies on Zoom too. If someone on the other team goes to the bathroom, you should go with them. I know, 2 reasons. 1, you can talk to them and prevent them from stealing prep. You can be like, hey, how's your day? How's it going? What'd you have for lunch? That way they can't be thinking about the debate. So you're like stopping them from stealing prep. And then also, that's a free bathroom break for you, but you're not extending the amount of time of dead time that is taken away from the debate. So follow the other person to the bathroom if they go on the other team. Obviously, you can't go in the same gender bathroom or whatever, but you can follow along, talk to them the whole way, talk to them the whole way back. I learned that from someone I coached with a couple of years ago. So minimize bathroom breaks. If the other team takes them, go with them. I have in here, don't steal prep again, just because, it's that important. So don't steal prep. The big picture, the bottom line, the headline, the takeaway is you want debates to be as efficient as possible, and you want to minimize the time that your judge is just sitting in the debate with nothing happening. The next section that I have is after debates. So in a similar manner or in a similar vein of minimizing dead time, you want to be ready to send whatever evidence the judge wants as soon as the debate is over. So many judges like to see just like complete documents of cards that are relevant in the debate. So like every card that was read on relevant issues. If your judge is one of those, you want to assemble that as quickly as possible. Some judges only want to see specific cards. You want to find out what those are and send them as fast as possible. So an easy hack for this when you're neg is to assemble a card document while the 2AR is prepping. That way you can hit send as soon as the 2AR is over. If you're affirmative, for example, the 1A can be working on assembling this document during 2AR prep if they're not doing other stuff. Or if you're both prepping for the 2AR, after the 2AR, get it together as quickly as possible. Next, at least one partner should stay in the room while the judge is deciding. And I could go either way with this on Zoom, but I think it is fine to leave your camera on while the judge is deciding also. It kind of gets at the same thing, which is, first of all, that it signals to the judge that you're serious and you want to win. When you stay in the room, you're signaling that you care about what is happening, that you have some investment in the decision that is being made, and that you're preparing for the next debate. So ideally, both people are doing this. If someone needs to go to the bathroom or get food, do it one at a time, but at least one person should stay in the room at all times. And again, like on Zoom, I think that keeping your camera on achieves the same effect. It also means that someone can answer any clarifying questions about evidence or send additional cards if your judge needs them. So stay in the room, keep your camera on, signal your investment in the debate, even after it's over. Next, write down feedback from your judge. There is including the RFD, there is very little more frustrating than telling debaters everything you thought about what they did in the debate and having them not write any of it down. It is also helpful for you because it helps you figure out how your judge decided, like what the process they went through in making their decision and what influenced their decision the most. So this gives you a ton of feedback and information about your judge that will help you when they judge you in the future. So it is both important for signaling value and for practical knowledge that you can take forward. Relatedly, ask questions of the judge, and these questions should be meaningful. So people don't love the questions that are just like, how could I improve the 1NR? Be more specific than that. Ask concrete questions about the strategy or particular skills questions or something that you're working on improving. Ask concrete questions and then write down the answers. Relatedly, emailing judges with further questions can be very useful for all the same sets of reasons. You can find out more about how they made their decision. You can find out more about what they thought about the strategy or what they thought about your technique. But it's important to like be cool about this and don't get upset if they don't respond, because as we discussed above, like judges are busy people. They have a lot going on. Sometimes they'll forget. Sometimes they just won't have time. The other caveat to this is that the least useful or most annoying questions to get from people are about speaker points. So like when you're like, what could I do to get better speaker points? People are like, I don't know, like be better. Like, it's just hard to know. You make speaker points decisions on like a pretty snap basis in the debate. They're like, it's kind of a gut check. And you're not like calculating, oh, like I subtracted 0.5 because of like this or whatever. So asking questions about this can be very difficult to answer and is unlikely to give you much meaningful feedback, which is not to say that you can't get information based on speaker points. Like you can see how your points went at a given tournament. You can see how they improved or have gotten worse over time. But asking the judges like why they gave particular speaker points is unlikely to be particularly fruitful. Relatedly, did you know that you can see ballots and comments on tab room? We knew this? Good. I wanted to make sure that we knew this because it is this can be very useful. And you should ask your coach if you don't have access to those, because they can set it up to make sure that you can see it. I would go ahead and check those things after tournaments. Not every judge will write something, but what people do write is likely to be very helpful for future improvement for all the same reasons that like talking to your judge is useful. And finally, talk with your teammates about what happened in their debates. You can get a ton of valuable information about judges, about the strategies that you're reading, about what people think of your evidence from intra-squad learning. So ask questions of your teammates about what happened in their debates. It can be very easy to tunnel vision and only care about what happens in your debates, but the same people will judge you, the same sets of evidence will be used, the same strategies will be used, and you want to find out what is happening in debates. So ask questions of your teammates, talk to your coaches about particular pieces of evidence or issues, and kind of use the squad dynamic as a resource for future improvement. The last thing I want to cover is the anatomy of a debate. I want to talk about what is happening at all times during a debate. And some of this is going to sound a little bit basic or be like, I already knew this, but it is worth a refresher because especially, I see a lot of times people at camp are like, I didn't feel like I had enough prep time, or like, how do I figure out what to say in so little time? And the truth is that you actually have a lot of time during debates to be writing out your speech that people just don't take advantage of. So some of this gets back to like the cross-ex stuff and making the best use of cross-ex and prep time. It's all kind of a piece. So I'm going to talk about what each person is doing during each speech. So the 1AC. The 1A is obviously giving the 1AC. There's a few things the 2A can be doing during this time. If it is a new affirmative or something that you're not very familiar with, you want to be flowing the 1AC. An even better use of that time, or next level kind of step, is to backflow the 1AC, which is have you all heard of backflowing? It means flowing it twice for your partner, once for you and once for your partner. We're going to talk more about backflowing in a minute, but backflow the 1AC for your partner if it's new and you feel like you need to get a flow of it. You can also be preparing the 2AC. The 2A can also be preparing the 2AC if they have some idea what the negative is going to read. They can be looking at the wiki for the negative team to figure this out and start to assemble the 2AC. They can be prepping. There's all kinds of stuff the 2A can be doing during the 1AC. The negative. During the 1AC. The 2N should be reading through the 1AC, if they haven't already, reading through the evidence as it's being read, and preparing cross-ex questions. So the 1AC speaking is a very important time for the 2N to start to prepare the strategy for the cross-ex of the 1AC. The 1N should be making sure that the speech doc for the 1NC is complete and prepared. So that obviously requires engaging with the 2N, but the 1N needs to make sure that the 1NC is good to go. Again, you want to hit send before the cross-ex for the 1AC is over. So you want to be ready to go as soon as humanly possible to give the 1NC. So that's the 1AC. 1AC cross-ex. The 1A is being cross-ex. The 2N is doing the cross-ex. The 2A should be listening to that cross-ex. This is a time when, if you think the 1A is not answering questions correctly, it is okay to jump in, but probably don't do that because probably they're fine. It is also going to send some signals about the 1NC strategy. So you should be listening to the questions to figure out where the negative is going with this debate. The 1N should be listening to the cross-ex and incorporating arguments into the 1NC on the case. So like the 1AC cross-ex can only be about the 1AC. It can only be about the case. And so all questions that are asked of the 1AC can become arguments that the 1N can make. So like, they don't solve, no internal link, no impact uniqueness. All of that should be stuff that the 1N is incorporating into the 1NC frontline on the case by listening to the cross-ex of the 1AC. 1NC. 1N is speaking. 2N is flowing. 2N is also backflowing for the 1N. So the 2N is flowing the 1NC for themselves and they're flowing it for the 1N. 1A should be flowing. The 1A should also be preparing cross-ex questions. The 2A should be flowing and preparing the 2AC. Cross-ex of the 1NC. 1N is answering questions. 1A is asking questions. 2A is obviously preparing the 2AC. So this is like 3 free minutes of prep time for the 2AC. Another good example of like, if the 2A is participating in cross-ex of the 1NC, it better be something really important that is going to influence what you say in the 2AC, because otherwise it's a waste of time. Preparing the 2AC. And then the 2N should be listening to this cross-ex, starting to prepare the 2NC, and figuring out where the F is going to go with their set of arguments. 2AC. 2A is speaking. 1A. 1A is flowing and backflowing. This is maybe the most important speech to backflow, because the 2A is giving the speech, so they will not have a good flow of what they said. It is the 1A's job to provide a flow for the 2A. So the 1A should be flowing and backflowing for the 2AC during the 2AC. The 1N should be flowing. The 2N should be flowing. Not super complicated on the next side during the 2AC. Both partners must be flowing the 2AC. 1N is getting some cross-ex questions ready, but they're doing it in a way that enables them to flow. Both partners must have a flow of the 2AC to avoid the kinds of cross-ex questions that we talked about earlier that are like, did you make any theory arguments? How many cards did you read on this? Which cards did you read? We are getting rid of all of those cross-ex questions because we are flowing. Cross-ex of the 2AC. I want to pause and say that the negative should take prep time before this cross-ex to get on the same page. So before cross-ex of the 2AC, 1N and 2N should take a little prep time. Make sure that you know how you're going to divide the block. That ensures that the cross-ex is productive, that it is about issues that are going to matter for the 1NR, and that it is not on anything that you're going to kick. And it also makes sure that the 2N can be prepping effectively during that cross-ex. So cross-ex of the 2AC, the 2N is prepping for the 2NC. 1N is obviously asking questions. And 1A, what do you think the 1A is doing during this time? What was happening during the 2AC that might not be done yet? So the 1A can start to prepare for the 1AR, but before we get to that, we want to make sure that the backflowing of the 2AC is done. So most 1As will not finish backflowing during the actual 2AC and will need to take the cross-ex to actually do it. So again, 1A, very busy during this cross-ex, does not have a ton of time to be intervening, certainly should not be asked if they have any questions. 2NC. 2N is speaking. 1A and 2A are flowing. 1A is flowing with an eye toward writing the 1AR. So they do not need to write down every single word that is said by the block. They want to write down enough so that they can start to prepare their answers. 2A is flowing so that they know what's going on. They're starting to read through the cards. They're starting to prepare cards, pull cards for the 1A to read in the 1AR. One N is preparing the 1NR. The 1N is the only one not paying any attention to what's going on in the 2NC, and this is the only speech and debate where someone cannot be not paying attention to what's happening. Cross-ex of the 2NC. 2N is answering questions. 2A is asking questions. 1N is preparing the 1NR. This is your last 3 minutes of prep time for the 1NR. So they're like putting their finishing touches. They're getting ready to hit send so that they're ready to stand up as soon as it's over. They're doing all of that. The 1A is preparing the 1AR. That's again 3 free minutes of prep time that people don't pay attention to, that you get 3 free minutes of prep time for the 1AR during cross-ex of the 2NC. 1NR. 1N is speaking. 2N is flowing. Very important to flow the 1NR. That should be obvious, but you never know. 2A and 1A are both flowing. 1A is, again, flowing in a way that enables them to prepare effectively for the 1AR. Prep time for the 1AR. The 1A is getting the speech ready. They're talking to the 2A. They're getting everything done. 1N and 2N should be having a conversation about the block, assessing what you think happened, what you think went well, maybe where the 1A could pivot, getting ready for the 2NR. 1AR. 1A is speaking. 2A is flowing. 2A is flowing. I saw a bunch of practice debates where the 2A was not flowing the 1AR, either because they were like doing something else or because they were preparing things for the 1A to say. That is a massive mistake. You should not be taking up 1AR time writing out things for the 1A to say, because they should be able to do it on their own. 1AR blocks will help with that. But, you know, at the worst, you need to be flowing the 1AR so you know what was in it. 1N and 2N are flowing. Prep time for the 2NR. 2N is getting ready to give the 2NR. 1N is being as helpful as possible in whatever way the 2N finds most useful. All of that is happening. The AF should also be preparing during this time. So like, just because you just gave a speech and the 2NR doesn't happen yet, doesn't mean you have no idea what's going on. It doesn't mean that you can be totally checked out. So AF should be starting to prepare the 2R. 2NR. 2NR is happening. 1N is flowing it. 1N flows the 2NR. That is important. You want to have a complete map of what's happened in the debate. You want to be able to help the 2N if they're missing something. So 1N is flowing the 2NR. 1A and 2A are obviously both flowing the 2NR as well. Prep time for the 2AR. Remember, this is where the neg team is going to be getting their speech doc ready or their card doc ready to send to the judge. The 1A is helping the 2A if they need help. If they don't need help, maybe they're preparing the AF card document. 2AR, the 2A is speaking, what is everyone else doing? All three of the other people are doing the same thing. Flowing. So you want everyone to have a complete map of the debate, and that includes the 2AR. That includes the speech where no one else has a speech ready to give. So it's easy to check out, but you want to know what has happened in the debate. You want to be able to have a complete strategic map of what has occurred so that you can ask questions of the judge that are meaningful and so that you can do your best possible redos knowing what has happened. Debate is over. We go through, all of the steps that we talked about before. We send the cards that the judge wants to the judge. We stay in the room. We get ready to hear the decision. We listen to the decision. We write down things. We ask questions, and then we move on to our next debate, and the whole thing begins over again. That's what I've got. Do you all have questions? Okay, you can go to your next elective. Thanks for coming.